A new report shows climate change is threatening homes and buildings in Canada, putting us at physical and financial risk. Joining us this morning is Ness. He's the Adaptation Research Director for the Canadian Institute for Climate Choices. This is the organization that issued the report. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
There's fascinating information in there, and I want to start with the estimates that say flood damage to home and buildings could increase tenfold by the end of the century, reaching $13.6 billion a year. So where are homes at risk?
It's not something that's focused in one particular area. It's everywhere across the country, from the coasts in the lower mainland of BC and the maritime provinces, where sea level rise is going to increase flooding from storm surges, to inland along rivers that are going to flood more frequently, and in urban areas where flash flooding overwhelms storm sewer systems and backs up into basements. So really, there's nowhere in Canada that's not at risk of this change.
I'm going to get to how people can find that out in a moment. But in the meantime, you obtained some data from a private risk management company that shows 500,000 buildings are at risk of flooding from rainfall, but owners would have no way of knowing this. So how should climate risks be disclosed?
So we're strongly recommending that governments across the country invest in updating our information about where flooding is a risk. Over 500,000, as we say, homes and buildings across the country are at risk, but aren't found on any publicly available maps, only in mapping that is available for a cost, usually used by large corporations and insurance companies. So we need governments to develop the mapping and make it available to everybody so that we can build this information into our decisions about where we buy homes and where we build homes.
Absolutely, because, I mean, it's probably one of your for most people, it's their most valuable asset. You wouldn't build necessarily next to a landfill site, nor do you want to be living on a floodplain. The report says adaptation could cut costs of damage. So what changes need to be done to ensure the safety of homes already there?
So there's many things that can be done. In some cases, there are fairly simple things that can be done, like installing backflow valves that keep basements from flooding. But by and large, it's going to require some big investments as well in infrastructure, whether it's building up seawalls and protective measures along coasts, or building dams and levees along rivers, and upgrading sewer systems in some of Canada's biggest cities to make sure that they're able to handle the more frequent and intense rainfall that we're going to see in the decades ahead.
Ryan, you're obviously passionate about this issue. It's one of the driving forces behind the report. Why do you think that the public isn't aware of these kinds of risks?
Well, in some ways, it's challenging to develop this information. When you think about flood risk, for example, there are probably about 1 million homes and buildings across the country in total that are at risk. So developing the mapping and doing the modeling to generate that information is expensive and time-consuming, and there aren't really all that many incentives to do that right now. Of course, most people who are selling homes, for example, would not want information to be there that says that the home might be at risk and might be worth less than it otherwise is. So there are disincentives to create and disclose this information on the private side, which is why governments really need to step in and make sure that not only is this information developed so that it can be used across the country, but so that it is built into decisions, whether it's selling homes and buildings or buying stocks in companies that have infrastructure that's at risk from climate-related disasters like flooding.
Are policymakers doing enough, paying enough attention to this issue?
It's becoming more of an issue. Adaptation is the other side of the climate action coin. We've spent a lot of time talking about reducing emissions, reducing greenhouse gas emissions, which is obviously critical. And the more the world is successful in doing that, the less climate change we're going to have to adapt to. But we're now committed to a certain amount of baked-in climate change from the emissions of the past. So we need to adapt to a climate that's going to change regardless of what we are going to do with emissions. So hopefully after this year of climate chaos, Canadian governments and policymakers will pay even more attention to that, make equal levels of investment give equal amounts of attention to adaptation so that we can withstand and be resilient to a more volatile and hotter climate of the future.
Ryan Ness, great to speak with you this morning. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you liked this, be sure to subscribe here, or you can check out more Your Morning videos right here.